trying to create. Now let's go further. Let's listen to another perspective on this.
Every time there's a major mass shooting in America, as in the case of the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre or this latest tragedy, the Charleston, South Carolina church shooting, many in the conspiracy community believe that the perpetrators are MK-Ultra CIA mind-controlled assassins who allegedly carried out their attacks after being, quote, programmed by the government so that the events can be used as a pretext or a reason to further restrict the Second Amendment with the ultimate plan of repealing it. But the reality is that the brainwashing that these...
That's the ultimate goal here. Take away the guns for all of this. Not only to create a race war, but by the race war, they're going to say, well, we have to ban all guns because there's too many people dying in the race war now. So again, understand what the ultimate agenda and goal is when these types of events happen.
Subhuman scum have underwent isn't quite so personalized. They have been indoctrinated from birth, brainwashed from birth by the satanic mainstream media, which has trained them to believe that killing is cool, that mass murder is exciting and fun. Indoctrinated with television shows like Hannibal on NBC, which glorifies serial killing, or the new Aquarius series, glorifying Charles Manson and mass murder. Being trained from as teens and preteens through video games like Call of Duty into rewiring their brain into believing that the more people they kill, the more exciting and fulfilling their life is. Brainwashed through mentally enslaving mainstream music like scumbags like Pig Ross, who glorify gangbanging and killing. Of course, this event is being capitalized on by the gun-grabbing crowd, Hillary Clinton and President Obama, using the event to try to further their gun control agenda. But the reality is that there are thousands of loose cannons out there that have become mind-controlled through the mainstream media mind-controlling system, having their brains hijacked through the satanic system. Really, this scum, Dylann Roof, more than just a racist, he is a Satanist, hating God, hating his fellow man, not an ounce of compassion or love in his heart. This is the product of the mainstream.
Well, I mean, when you see pictures of this kid and he's showing him on there, all you could think of is just death. He's just dead inside. Is really all you can really gather. He's dead. He's dead inside. You know, he's been taken over. He's like a walk-in where the devil's just come into him and he's just basically on satanic autopilot.
Media's mind-controlling system. This is the product of the breakdown of the family. This is the result of decades now of indoctrination through the main...
I mean, the kid goes into the church, sits there, and they're so nice and welcoming and treating him like, you know, like a fellow Christian. And he even said, he says, they were so nice to me, I almost wasn't able to kill them all. How could you do that? I mean, particularly if they were really super nice, you know what I mean? I mean, granted, I mean, how can anybody do that even if they were mean? But they're like going out of their way to be super, super nice and compassionate and Christ-like, and then you have, and of all the cowardly places on the planet to do it, a place where, you know, you go in and it's a Christian church. They're in the middle of like a little prayer Bible study. How pitiful. Killing those, it just makes you want to cry. The thought of how could you do something like that?
Mainstream media, which has trained people from birth into believing that mass murder, serial killers, gang banging, and gun violence is, quote, cool. And while the liberals will blame guns, that is really just a symptom of the problem. The problem is the loss of humanity. The problem is the loss of love. The problem is this satanic New World Order has trained kids from birth, brainwashing them into believing that killing is cool. Of course, this satanic scum, reveling in his newfound fame. But when he meets his new cellmates in the dark corners of his new prison cell, he will be unable to escape the karma that is coming back to punish him for his devilish deeds. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my...
And what's more so than that is when he gets to hell, then he really won't be able to escape. I pray if it be possible this guy's soul be saved, but I mean, you look at him and, you know, you just look at, and whether he actually is a real MK Ultra mind control slave, a government slave that was triggered. In other words, he had a murder program, and this happens all the time, okay? Or whether he was just what he was portrayed to be. The dude's pure evil, you know, as far as I can see. So now let's go further from that. And again, there was a report that was entitled "The One Thing That All of these shootings, these mass murder shootings, all have in common, and what the press never reports on, and that's that they're all on these mind-altering drugs." The only thing that is ever blamed is the guns. Okay, the shooter's not even really that much blamed. The drugs are never blamed. It's the gun's fault. The gun just sprouted legs and went into the church and just started killing everybody. Is almost the way they would like to portray it if they could get you to buy into that whole false narrative. You know, the gun takes on the personality of the possessor. It's like money. You can use money for evil, you can use it for good. Guns are the same way. Guns prevent far more crimes, far more murders. It is, and I heard that statistic this week. It was unbelievable how many murders, how many crimes that guns prevent on average. But when guns get into the hands of criminals, and especially if they're mind-controlled, drug addict, psychotropic med, pharmakia criminals, demon-possessed, well then obviously that gun can take on the personality and will take on the personality of the possessor. But it's not the gun's fault. Okay, so this report is brief. It's Suboxone, which was the drug that he was on, the psych drug behind the Charleston shooting. Suboxone is a powerful psychoactive drug which is supposedly, I put in supposedly, utilized in breaking heroin and narcotic pain reliever addictions. Now, what is a devil his age, and I call him a devil because he is a devil. What is a devil his age on a drug that you would use to break heroin and narcotic pain reliever addictions? What is he doing on this drug? Just like methadone, Suboxone has huge downside risks and adverse side effects. Methadone alone, just give you a little background on that. Methadone is such a dangerous drug that dedicated clinics were set up around the country because patients could not be trusted with more than 1 day's dose at a time. Hence, the daily visits. So you're totally addicted to this drug to the point where you can't be trusted and you're ball and chain to your methadone clinic. What a great way to live life, I'll tell you. Methadone is actually more dangerous than all prescribed narcotic painkillers and can threaten a patient's life with each dose. Well, that's all by design, of course, because the Illuminati is the one that designs these drugs through the big pharma medical cartels. As a matter of fact, a methadone user doesn't even have to be addicted to methadone to die from it. The very first dose can kill them, unlike both heroin and morphine. Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, you take enough heroin or morphine, you can die, but I guess it has a higher risk. As for adverse side effects of Suboxone, which is the drug we're talking about here, there are many that can be severe. It has been reported that violent outbursts and aggressive acts of rage can be experienced while under the influence of Suboxone. Well, that's what you had at the Charleston shooting. There are other extreme and significant behavioral outcomes which can be exhibited by those who are under the influence of Suboxone, which fit into the violent acts of the Charleston shooter. Charleston shooter Dylann Roof was a known drug user who was caught with a powerful mind-altering narcotic Suboxone when apprehended by police during an incident. That was all the way back in February of 28th. Bottom line here is that the powerful psychoactive drugs can push young people into all sorts of antisocial and destructive behavior. Well, there's a big fat devil associated with these drugs, okay? So you're on these psychotropic meds, understand there's demons literally attached to those drugs. So you're not just getting the mind-altering effects, the pharmakeia effect of the drug, the sorcery effect, you're getting the demonic effect, the demonic component as well. But you can't see that part. The presence of these drugs is rarely, if ever, discussed in the mainstream media in the wake of events like Charleston. No, never. That's the main thing they should be discussing. No, that doesn't fit our narrative. We want to cause and foment a race war. And that doesn't fit our narrative at all. We want to get all the angst on these evil white people, and then the blacks, and then the white people can view the black people as evil, and then we can all have a big nice race war. We want to get them hating each other. That's what we want. Okay? And that whole Suboxone thing, yeah, it was useful. It's a useful tool to get these people to act. But that doesn't fit into our narrative, so we're not going to report on that. Do you see how cut and dry, simple this is when you start analyzing it? The focus is always on the usage of guns rather than the radically all, and that's the other thing, ban all guns, create a race war. Kill two birds with one stone. So they focus on the guns rather than the radically altered state of mind of the shooter. Now, and you knew this was coming immediately. Next report, Obama's complete disarmament of America plans near completion. What comes next is beyond words. Yet the Muslim terrorists, Al-Qaeda, and the gangs of Mexico are all armed by our government with assault rifles and things of this nature. But we don't have any right to have those to protect our families, no. So here's a couple pictures of Obama, and one, if you like your guns, you can keep them, period, while he's winking, because he knows he's a fork-tongued liar for the pit of hell. And then another one where he's got this really cocky look on his face, and it says, demands gun control, meaning Obama, and approves gun shipments to Al-Qaeda, all on the same day. So he must have actually had the audacity to do this all on the same day at one point. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, President Obama, and I'm not going to play his online audio. That guy's so evil, I don't even know where to begin. And it's so obvious what his agenda is, and it's everything he's doing at this point is purely satanic, purely evil. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, President Obama and Charleston Mayor Joseph P. Riley Jr. both rushed to issue statements demonizing the Second Amendment over the shooter's actions. The Second Amendment, if it was in play in that church, would have prevented, I'm convinced, at least several of those deaths, if not all of them. Why? Because if one person in the church would have been armed, he wouldn't have been able to carry out what he was doing unless he got the jump on that person. I remember the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church I used to go to back in North Fort Myers, Florida. Man, you wouldn't have wanted to have done that in that church. I mean, everybody was concealed carry. All the men. And they never had any problems. But when you disarm, when you have these gun-free zones, which is what this church was, because all churches in South Carolina have to be gun-free zones, well, then you create a perfect killing ground for whatever mind control idiot savage wants to walk in there and start blazing away. And then you blame the guns when it was because the fact that there were no firearms present. Now, I'm not saying God can't protect you, but we're destroyed for lack of knowledge, and these people in there were basically sitting ducks. And isn't it funny that all of these mass shootings always occur in these gun-free zones? Because it's the gun's fault. It's the exact opposite of what they're saying. if people were armed in the gun-free zones, number one, the idiot that has the gun that wants to kill everybody would think long and hard about carrying out what he's doing. He might not even ever carry it out just from that threat alone. Look at Kennesaw, Georgia. Everybody in Kennesaw, Georgia has to have a gun in their house, and there's been virtually no murders in the last, I don't know how many murders did that prevent because everybody had a gun in the house. Oh, probably hundreds. Either directly or indirectly across the years of time. But guns are the evil. They're the source of all our problems. When it's actually, the reality is this agenda that they have to implement and to take away our guns is the very thing that is going to cause millions and millions and billions, I believe, of death. Just like it did wherever society's been disarmed. That's why they want to do it. They want to kill everybody. Isn't it ironic that it's like Satan's up there through these satanic mouthpieces saying, "We need your guns, we need your guns, we need your guns." Why? Well, if you were given truth serum, if they were all, well, the reason why, if they were all forced to tell the truth, we want to kill you. That's why. There's too many people in the world. We got to reduce the world population to 500 million. You're useless eaters, and we definitely want to kill the Christians and the pro-liberty and the pro-Second Amendment and the returning veterans and the pro-lifers. And the people that are against gays or Planned Parenthood, they all need to die. That's why we want to disarm you. Of course. If they were all given truth serum, that's what they'd say. Not only that, what they'd say is, we're going to view your deaths, because a lot of you we're going to try to torture and get the maximum amount of agony and pain out of, because the demons and devils love that stuff. And we're going to view your deaths like a big satanic sacrifice to Satan. Because that way we'll get pleasure and we'll get more power. And Satan, our father, will be happy. That's why they want your guns. Cut and dry. Is that politically correct enough, what I just said? Do you think Hillary Clinton would like that, or Barack Hussein Obama? Would they like what I just said? It's the truth. And they know it's the truth. They're nothing but pure evil, all of them. While Hillary Clinton voiced her support for stricter gun control in the wake of last week's shooting in South Carolina, speaking at the 83rd annual U.S. Conference on the Mayor's Side, because everybody's got to get on this gravy train. Everybody's got to ride the coattails of this Charleston shooting. She said to this conference of mayors that she supported President Obama's call for further infringement on the Second Amendment if it means that it will help the victims of, quote, gun violence. What would have been the best is if people in there were armed, and this gun violence would have probably never have happened. Because this little coward that went in there and did it wouldn't have had the moxie to do it, knowing that other people were going to shoot back. I mean, look at that pathetic excuse for a human being. He's not brave. He's not courageous. If he thought people were going to be shooting back, he wouldn't have ever tried to pull this off. He's a coward. You could just look at him and know it. And so many of these guys, it's the same way. You look at them, they're just little worms. They're just little worms with some kind of satanic agenda. Maybe they're a pure mind control slave that was triggered. True. They're all on these psychotropic meds, every single one of them. It gives them enough demonic impetus to go and do what they do. That's what it is. And then we have Karl Rove, who says, Republican strategist Karl Rove, said on Fox News Sunday, and there's a Republican, the only way to stop gun-related violence, like the Wednesday massacre at Emmanuel African Methodist Church in Charleston, South Carolina, was to repeal American citizens' Second Amendment rights. It's the only way to stop it. Okay, we do that, and then the only ones that have the guns are the criminals and the criminal government. All by design. So then the sheep will really be ready for the slaughter. When Chris Wallace asked Rove how we can, quote, stop the violence, The longtime gun rights advocate stated that we have made great strides as a nation in empathizing with the victims of these types of shootings, but the only way to guarantee they will stop is to remove guns from society. Only the law-abiding citizens is what he means. You'll never remove guns from society. The criminals always have them and find a way to get them, and the criminal government will have them. I'm not saying everybody in the government's criminal. I'm saying the people at the top of the food chain, like Clinton and Obama and them, their agenda is to put guns in the hands of criminals and their criminal minions who will carry out the implementation of the New World Order. I'm not saying there's not a lot of good cops or a lot of good people in military and things of that nature, or in branches of the government. But they're becoming, unfortunately, fewer and fewer as, Obama does his military purge and, gets rid of the decent generals or the decent colonels and these types of things, or ones that would be against his agenda. And that's been going on for a long time now. And then we have the devil himself, the Pope, says weapons manufacturers can't call themselves Christian. People who manufacture weapons or invest in weapons industries are hypocrites if they call themselves Christians, Pope Francis said on Sunday. Francis issued the toughest condemnation to date of the weapons industry as a rally of thousands of young people at the end of the first day of the trip to the Italian city of Turin. Oh, you mean where they have the Shroud of Turin or whatever? That lying garbage relic of the Catholic Church. If you don't believe that, key in Turin in the keyword search box at contendingfortruth.com, Turin, and I debunk that whole Shroud of Turin. It's so easy to do biblically, you will be astounded. But again, I'm not condemning anybody if they haven't figured that out, but I just take you into the Bible and show you that there's no possible way this could be the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. It's just one more lying Catholic relic that Catholics go en masse to worship. My comment on all of this is, so now we have the most wicked satanic people on the earth, which we just quoted, calling for your guns and giving us Christians, pro-Second Amendment and pro-freedom folks, a morality lesson. It's like Satan giving us a morality lesson, telling us what is, what kind of hypocrites are we if we don't want to ban all the guns. It's like Satan giving me a morality lesson. Considering the source, we know it is because they know a disarmed populace is very, very easy to slaughter, pillage, molest, imprison, and control. After all, in the last century, governments murdered over 260 million of their own citizens. But first, they had to confiscate their guns. Adolf Hitler said in 1933, to conquer a nation, first disarm its citizens. And all the experts agree, like Hitler, Castro, Gaddafi, Stalin, Obama, Idi Amin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, Kim Jong-il II, and Pelosi, that strict gun control does work. How many millions and millions, I mean, way over a billion. You look at all those guys, way over a billion in the slaughter of disarmed populations. It's all by design. This is why I say this is such a linchpin issue. If they get the guns, okay, it's game over. I'm not saying God can't preserve his remnant. I'm saying for America in general, it's over. The slaughter will begin. When or if that happens. I pray to God it doesn't. But I'm telling you, it is a huge linchpin issue. No matter what is going on, no matter what cataclysms you see, if they get the guns, the slaughter will commence in earnest. Guaranteed. There's a history, there's a pattern, and history repeats itself. Now, back on March 27, 2012, Charles Hurt at the Washington Times put out a story in which he begins by saying, it turns out he's not Kenyan at all. He's KGB, meaning Obama. All this time, people were worried that President Obama was born in Africa and that his radical agenda had been crafted by Reverend Jeremiah Wright and Saul Alinsky on the streets of Chicago's South Side. Now we know his real radical hidden agenda is the service of the Kremlin. Okay, well, it's one of the many agendas he serves, okay? He serves every satanic agenda you could possibly imagine. Pro-abortion, pro-gay, that Saul Alinsky, you've got Islam, you've got everything evil that a person could stand for. That is what Obama is all about. Okay, so I'm not going to just pin him down on one agenda. So, this guy that wrote this proceeded to tell us that Barack Obama has reached his darkest low as a president. He's obviously had many, many more lows since then, because that was back in 2012. While in South Korea, when an unseen microphone caught him plotting with the leaders of Russia to ignore the will of the American people to help the enemies of America. I just realized I went way over in the first part, so I'm going to split this one, and I'm going to keep going now because I might as well. I'm going to try to split it later and then redo it. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself here. So going further here, let's see here. Well, South Korea, when an unseen microphone caught him plotting with the leader of Russia to ignore the will of the American people to help the enemies of America advance their own interests, Hurt added that Obama was assisting those who longed to see the world's last remaining beacon of freedom finally be destroyed. For those of you who have never saw the video, you can click on it here. We're learning that Hurt was correct. We may now be witnessing the final vestiges of what once was a shining beacon. What exactly was Barack Obama's secret message to Russia, and how does that fit into today? Obama was overheard on a microphone delivering a secret message to Russian President Dmitry Medvedev regarding the U.S. missile defense system. He basically said, if you work with me now, I'll have, quote, more flexibility after my second term as president. Now, I know that's weird if we're supposedly gearing up for war with Russia. Okay, but remember, this is all theater. So what is the actual real truth? I mean, there may be a real war, true, okay, but is this all being done to create that order out of chaos, that shock and awe, that fear that will motivate people to give up more liberty? Okay, so bear that in mind as well. ANP and many other alternative news sites have reported widely upon Obama's military purge. We've seen Christians, veterans, and U.S. Constitution supporting Americans labeled as terrorists. And now we are seeing a tremendous uptick in this since the South Carolina shooting. In this April 15th story, we learned that Barack Obama admitted that he was schooled in white racism by communists in a recently emerged 1995 video. The FBI has Obama's mentor, Frank Marshall Davis, his communism file. We know that Barack Obama has bowed down before the Chinese Communist government and has vowed to disarm Americans. The United Nations will settle for nothing less. Authoritarian regimes for many hundreds of years have been disarming their populations right before the slaughter. Embedded at the bottom of this story is a 1984 story called Amararus. Now you can click on the link. I'm not going to get into all this stuff, but the link's there with this report and you can explore it further. But the story is called Amararus by Robert Fuller, and it was about the coming joining of America and Russia as one country. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think they're going to have the 10 regions under Antichrist. I think you're going to have the one world government. I'm not saying that America and Russia are going to join. I wouldn't go that far, but it's a theory they have. So what was Obama's promise to Russia? With a horrific shooting in South Carolina that has been called out by many as a false flag event, Barack Obama has now even more ammunition to continue that destruction of freedom in America. They've long tried to legislate the problem away, and even the South Carolina law that prohibited guns in churches was ineffective at stopping what took place. However, they neglect to say, had someone else been armed in the church, we'd likely only be looking at a dead shooter. Again, confirming what I just said. And they always make sure that these mass shooting events always take place in gun-free zones, knowing that they are going to do everything possible to cover that fact up in the media. You know, Obama's own statements broadcast to the world after the shooting, because they don't want to have some hero in there actually stopping the shooting from happening. That would be bad for their narrative. So they want to make sure everybody is definitely disarmed in the building so that nobody will be shooting back, so they can kill as many people as possible and inflict as much shock and awe on people as they can. That's why they do it. And a person in there with a gun that prevented this would have been a hero. He would have been taken to jail, unfortunately, because he wasn't allowed to have a gun. Even though he would have saved 9 lives, he would still be demonized in the press. In fact, they probably would have downplayed it. Probably wouldn't even hardly made the national news. You know what I mean? Yeah, probably. It would have been a blip. But if somebody would have been in there with a gun, all they would have been talking about is probably the bad person with the gun that prevented the mass murder. They'd spin it some way, you know, because that's what Satan does, you know. So going further here, Obama's own statements broadcast to the world after the shooting, specifically these lines, when read carefully, should tell us all what's coming next and help to explain the Jade Helm 15 and the huge military buildup we've been witnessing all over the country. Obama's full statement on South Carolina in this final video is below. But he says, I've had to make statements like this too many times, Obama said. We don't have all the facts, but we do know that once again, innocent people were killed in part because someone who wanted to inflict harm had no trouble getting their hands on a gun. The president continued, suggesting that the country has to act to prevent gun violence. He says, quote, now is the time for mourning and healing, but let's be clear. Here's Obama. At some point, we as a country, we have to reckon with the fact, and again, here's Satan giving us a morality lesson. We have to reckon with the fact that this mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. Name me one place where it doesn't happen in an advanced country with a large populace, particularly one that's being disarmed or encouraged to be disarmed. It would happen in a country if, like, Kennesaw, Georgia was a country. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't happen there. You're right. Why? Because everybody's armed. Every gun has every household has a gun by like law. Yeah, you're right on that one. If you consider Kennesaw, Georgia, a country. I mean, he just, it doesn't matter what the truth is with this devil. He just spews out lies. Then he said, it doesn't happen in other places with this kind of frequency. Oh, really? Yeah. What about like the Middle East? Where it's an absolute total part of life, or, you know, in China or North Korea where they kill people all, but oh, that's the criminal government doing it over in China and South Korea typically. So anyway, then he goes on to say, it is in our power to do something about it. So see, you don't have to read between the lines too far on that one to say, ban all guns, ban the Second Amendment, turn them in, you know. And again, unless there is enough pushback on this and enough prayer going up about all of these issues, these agendas will be, unfortunately, most likely implemented. This is the last thing they're waiting for. I think it's the reason why something like Jade Helm hasn't gone hot. I think they're trying everything in the world to see what they can do to get our guns, because they know that the attrition rate of their own troops is going to be massive if they can't get the guns ahead of time. They're not going to get them all anyway. I mean, there's no way. There's going to be a huge amount of people that will not. This guy's agenda, I mean, he's been the best thing for gun sales that the gun industry's ever seen. So obviously, because he is the poster child for buying more guns and more ammo, because everybody knows, so many people know what this satanic devil's agenda is, nobody in their right mind would actually turn their guns in, even if he said to do it, by some unjust law that they would supposedly enact. Of course, he'd probably have the 501c3 corporate whore church behind him, and I'm not saying they're all bad, but for the most part, they'd be behind him. Turn them all in. Romans 13, do whatever the government says, even if it's against the word of God, it doesn't matter. Even if it means, you know, you're all going to die and you're not going to be able to defend your family and you're not going to be able to, you know, yeah. Turn them all in. Be a good little brown shirt Nazi. Do whatever Obama says. There'll be a lot of churches out there doing that. But they haven't been able to pull it off yet. And there's been a lot of, I think there's been a massive awakening as well to this devil's agenda. And I think they realize that things are kind of starting to spiral out of control as far as what they're trying to get a handle on with this whole situation and their whole agenda. And I think that's why they're getting so much more aggressive, because they realize that this information that, like, I'm reporting on a weekly basis and a lot of other people, is reaching a critical mass with a lot of people. A lot of people are waking up and seeing what's going on. And that's bad. That's bad for them. But it's almost like a caged animal that's been put in a corner from their standpoint. And so they're getting more aggressive, it seems, with their agendas. So he's saying it's in our power to do something about it. So what they want to see is millions of people in the street demanding all of our guns. I don't think they're going to see that. The people afterward, a lot of black groups came out afterward and were saying, if this church had one person in there that was armed, this would have all been prevented. If there was concealed carry permitted in South Carolina in the churches, which there's not, this would have all been prevented. See, they have enough brains in their head to understand that, like anyone else that's getting woke up on this issue, whether you're black, white, whoever you are. There's a lot of people waking up to this and understanding, you know what? It's not the guns that are evil. In fact, they're the very thing that seems to be the thing that the criminal government wants so bad. I wonder why they want them so bad. Well, look at the statistics I just quoted. 260 million people killed, roughly in the last 100 years, by all of these despots and dictators and tyrannical tyrant devils from the pits of hell. And the slaughter only commenced once the population was disarmed? Yeah. That's what it's all about. That's why they want them so bad. Like they said, had someone been armed in the church, we'd likely only be looking at one dead shooter. Back on May 15th, more than a month prior to the South Carolina tragic event shooting, YouTube videographer Greenville Post captured this eye-opening military convoy on Route 95 in South Carolina. The convoy features a long series of armored military vehicles with soldiers fully armed riding along on the outside of them on one of America's biggest highways. Every day, All News Pipeline reports upon more of these convoys being seen all across the country. And that's all, we've been reported on that over and over and over, particularly in recent studies. Two things we've noticed are they're happening across the entire country, not just the Jade Helm 15 states. We've also noticed they're not going away. There's a reason this convoy was riding down South Carolina highway with fully armed men riding in the vehicles, fully exposed over a month ago. It's called conditioning. The plan, they already had been put in motion. The A&P reader told us the military convoy, just like on the Washington, D.C. Beltway just a few days ago, fully armed men on the outside of the machines of war in America. Talk about in your face. Their plan is clearly near completion. As former President Dwight D. Eisenhower said in his farewell address, only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. As of this moment, and that was the end of the quote, as of this moment, Americans in general have surely failed. While Mr. Obama may like to think it's in his power to do something about it and ban guns across America, as heard in the next video, well, you can hear that, I'm not going to play it. He'd need to have a dictatorial type of powers to actually do so. The ownership of firearms in America is protected by the Second Amendment. The fact that Mr. Obama has told us that it is within our power to do something about it leads straight into Jade Helm 15 and the massive military exercises that are taking place across the country. Barack Obama will attempt to use the South Carolina church shooting to ban guns. He already knows he won't be able to do it via legislation, so they've got their backup plan in place. They know they've tried before and failed. The way they've set it up, failure is no longer an option to them this time around. They're desperate and their backs are against the wall. They've got the largest fighting machine in the world, the one that I don't know about that. I would say China's a lot bigger, but anyway, the one that President Eisenhower warned us about. I'm not saying that China has maybe more technology or whatever. I'm not 100% sure about all that, but I think they've got a bigger fighting force, is what I'm saying. 100 million man army or whatever. They've got the largest fighting machine in the world, the one that President Eisenhower warned us about, ready to face down the American people. Mr. Obama has work to do for some very evil, important people. Thanks largely to his work, there will be only about 60 million people living in America in less than 10 years, according to Deagle. Remember the stats? That's 240 less people living here than are here right now. That means 240 million of us in America have to go between now and 2025, according to Deagle. And we're halfway through 2025. So we got 9.5 years. 240 million people have to die. That's like, normally populations increase. No, this is a decrease by like 80%. And isn't it funny? America's the only one that's projected to have that kind of massive. There are some that are projected, but only America is projected to have that 80% population reduction. According to Deagle.com, who's absolutely totally tied in with the government. And I'm telling you, the linchpin for all that to happen is disarmament of America, of its citizenry. That is what they're pushing for harder than anything. That's what they're going to be. And there'll probably be some other event next week, and then another one after that, and then they're just going to work people up into a froth as much as they have it within them. They're going to manipulate the news. And this is why prayer about all of these events, about like the summer solstice, and I put out an email on that, but about all the satanic things they're trying to do, about the disarmament and all of that, that prayer going up from the remnant Christian, born-again Christian saints is really the absolute main thing that I see moving the hand of God to prevent that, if it be his will. Because I'm not going to get up here and say that we've got to be. Yeah, I think we need to be proactive. I think we need to educate others, but I really believe it boils down to the prayer of the saints to counter this evil agenda. Mr. Obama is on a mission for the New World Order, and if he has his way, they will not be denied. And you can listen to the X22 report. It discusses the Charleston shootings and the multiple agendas that it will help fulfill. I'm not going to play that, though. Here we have a picture of a whole bunch of criminals that were nabbed by looks like to be the Mexican government. They're in handcuffs, and they're standing behind all of these weapons that we supplied them, our country, Operation Fast and Furious. And a lot of those weapons were used to kill Border Patrol agents, American ones. So the title of the picture says assault weapons. Good enough for Obama to sell to Mexican drug cartels for murder and mayhem, but too dangerous for you to have to protect your own family. I just always like to point out the absolute, utter, unmitigated hypocrisy of this devil and all of his minions in higher ups and lower downs, because like I said, he's a puppet. I'm not saying he's not, but just their hypocrisy is so apparent. And then you have Obama in this other picture saying Islam will dominate the world, behead all infidels, of these Muslims showing up these signs, and Obama's basically giving them the thumbs up, and he'll supply ISIS with weapons and Al Qaeda and these types of things to kill Christians, to behead them and to slaughter and rape and pillage. That's fine. Okay, but then Satan is going to come over here and give us a morality lesson and tell us we got to turn our guns in because of one moron here who's a mind control slave, essentially, on some psychotropic drug that goes in there to a gun-free zone, no accident there, and kills a whole bunch of innocent people. It's all backwards, everything. All their solutions, everything. It's the exact opposite of what it should be. Next report. Charleston shooting prompts gun rights supporters to call for more concealed carry at churches. See, this should be the solution. This is the only reasonable, logical solution. But it's the one thing that's being totally not reported. Well, in this case, at least the Washington Times put it out. He was a young gunman bent on shooting as many worshipers as possible, but Matthew J. Murray never got as far as Dylann Roof. The suspect in Wednesday's South Carolina church massacre, that's Dylann Roof, the suspect in Wednesday's South Carolina church massacre. Murray, this Matthew Murray, had already shot and killed 2 people in the parking lot when he burst into New Life Church in Colorado Springs. Before he could pull the trigger again, however, the 24-year-old shooter was gunned down by Janine Assam, a volunteer security guard with a concealed weapon permit. That was 8 years ago. Though, I guess it was a woman. Mrs. Assam was credited for saving as many as 100 lives that day. 100. They reported on InfoWars about that South African shooting where a guy with 5 bullets, he saved like 1,000 people. Had all these guys come in there with all of these weapons, and literally one guy with a revolver repelled all of them, and they all ended up they were going to kill everybody in the church, like 1,000 people, and one guy with one revolver with 5 bullets, he repelled the whole thing. Because see, you know something, when somebody's firing back, you start to really think twice. You might start to think about, especially if you're unsaved, you know, where I'm going to end up, and those cowardly instincts kick in, because I'm saying they're cowards. Anybody that would do that, go into a church and do that. And he was credited as saving about 1,000 lives. So, again, there we have guns in the hands of a righteous person doing a righteous thing, preventing all that wicked evilness from happening because they were armed. Here we see it again. And this would have been the same scenario had somebody in there been armed. Mrs. Assam was credited for saving as many as 100 lives that day. A dozen states continue, but even though that's the case, a dozen states continue to restrict the carrying of concealed firearms in churches. Oh, imagine that. It's only a dozen that do it, and he just so happens to show up in a South Carolina church, the oldest black South Carolina church, I think, in existence. So it's like super historic as well. All for more maximum shock effect. This is including South Carolina effectively creating gun-free zones, which coincidentally always seem to be places these mass murders show up to kill as many as possible. Which is obviously not an accident. Of course not. That's always where they're going to show up. The Emmanuel AME church shooting that left 9 dead Wednesday prompted not just a surge in calls from either the left for tighter gun controls, but also pleas from the right for churches to protect themselves by allowing their parishioners to carry concealed. That's the only reasonable, and yes, disarm everybody further. Unbelievable. So we just have all of this insanity that is being, shoved down people's throats. I'm going to try to get through this one, then I'll end this. This will actually be the end of part 2 that I'm coming up to. I had to split this teaching because I went over time. Obama's Department of Justice is working on more than a dozen. Now, here's the aftermath. They're working on more than a dozen new gun control regulations it plans to begin implementing apart from Congress. This is just rulership by decree. This is a dictator. Some of the regulations are set to be put in place by November, others simply by the end of the Obama administration. According to, quote, The Hill, the regulations range from new restrictions on high-powered pistols to gun storage requirements, and the issuance of new rules expanding criteria for people who do not qualify for gun ownership. Part and parcel to this new criteria will be an ATF-implemented ban on gun ownership for anyone convicted of a misdemeanor domestic violence. Gun Owners of America Michael Heyman warns that under this rule that the person barred from ownership could be someone who actually only spanked their child or yelled at his wife or slapped her husband. A misdemeanor domestic violence. Nope, no guns for you. No guns for returning veterans. No guns for anybody seeing a psychotherapist or on any kind of psychotropic med. Nope. See, they're just chipping and chipping and chipping, satanically chipping away. try to get them away from everybody. And then, oh, I'm sure, then it'll be people, Bible-believing Christians, oh, you're part of a hate group movement. The Bible's hateful. You're part of a hate group. Give me your guns. The new regulations will also include ATF enlargements on mental health-based gun ownership bans. Hammond summed up by saying the Obama administration is trying very hard to disqualify people from owning a gun on the basis that they are seen as psychologists. They're seen as psychologists, no guns. And the NRA pointed out that because mostly mentally ill persons pose no threat to society, most mentally ill persons pose no threat to society. And you know, somebody seen as a psychologist doesn't mean they're mentally ill. Give me a break. The new regulations will actually become snares for masses of mostly harmless individuals. Again, but to call them mentally ill because they're seen as psychologists, give me a break. In March, the NRA warned that the Attorney General nominee Loretta Lynch would be Eric Holder 2.0. Yet in April, 10 Republican senators sided with Democrats and confirmed Lynch as the Attorney General. Well, of course, because it's all one big satanic conspiracy. The Hill reports that those Republicans include Senator Kelly Iotti. These are all Republicans. Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Jeff Flake. What a great name. And Senator Mitch McConnell. All Republicans. All selling out the conservative base. They should just change their affiliation to Democrats. They're absolutely in lockstep with Obama and everything he does now. Lynch's DOJ now has the Second Amendment.